with Anna. She's connecting on her own device. We're in a cafe. We just stepped out of a physical meeting that we're in. So that's explains the strange surroundings that we're in. But while she connects, just wanted to welcome everybody to this working group meeting on crimes against the environment of the Alliance of NGOs on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Ian Tennant, the chair of the Alliance, and I can see lots of familiar and also new faces joining the call as we speak. And this is the second, I believe, meeting of the Alliance Working Group, and we're very honoured to have Stefano Betti here with us today. But I will, as Anna is now connected, I will allow her to hand over to her to give the introductory remarks.
So, thank you very much. I will try not to hear myself from the other. Camilla, your camera is still on, so okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. This is a little bit of a difficult connection. It was more difficult than we expected. Yeah. So we are glad that we managed somehow. Anyway, good afternoon and welcome to this briefing. As Ian said, this is a briefing that is part of the working group on crimes that affect the environment, working group of the Alliance of NGOs on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. It's a working group that the benefit of the background work and preparations by Michela Polimeni, who is here with us today. So Michela is a special host as well. And we are privileged today to have a speaker, Stefano Betti, who is an old friend of ours, who has been really working very, very closely to the crime prevention and criminal justice program for many years. And I just to introduce him very quickly before giving him the floor. We will listen to him and then we will have the possibility to have a discussion. I would like to invite everyone to write your questions in the chat, or to indicate that you would like to ask a question in the chat, so that we proceed effectively in addressing all your questions. So, Stefano Betti is an international security and criminal policy expert. He is the Deputy Director General of the Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade and an Associate Fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. He is regularly consulting with various UN entities and the World Bank on matters of counterterrorism, organized crime prevention, and criminal asset recovery. Previously, he has worked for Interpol, the UNODC, and UNICRI. So, Stefano, welcome. Thank you for accepting the invitation to speak today, and the floor is yours.
Anna, it's a great pleasure to be here, and many thanks for all the participants that, I don't know, took time to be present here, really. I really also want to thank more in general the Alliance of NGOs for these opportunities. And I would like to start by saying that the idea for this presentation and for this meeting really was born out of a LinkedIn post that I have been writing a couple of months ago, in which I was sketching a few ideas, and I was fortunate enough to have Anna read that post and calling me and propose that we do something about it, and maybe we create a bigger event. So thanks a lot, Anna, again for this opportunity that allows also me to have this initial idea circulate a little bit more widely. And this is also to say that what I'm going to say to you in a couple of seconds is not the outcome of any high-level academic research paper, but really some pragmatic thoughts that myself and my colleagues in my various capacities have been developing over the past few years, and I'm very happy to present them here. It's also it also means that I'm going to speak very bluntly, very informally, and in a relaxed manner. And so let me just start. I hope that someone is maybe projecting the PowerPoint presentation that I sent over.
Toby doing this?
Jara should be able. Yeah, Jara should be able to share her screen.
Jara?
Excellent.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much. Perfect. You can move to the next slide already. And I would like to go straight into the topic by showing you this picture. This is President Lula that is delivering his introductory speech at the UN General Assembly, the 78th session of the UN General Assembly that took place in New York in the month of September. And he made a number of statements, but one of the most relevant and probably interesting statements that he made in relation to what I'm going to say right now is that he mentioned that deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon has decreased by 48% over the previous 8 months. This is pretty outstanding and really suggests that efforts to preserve the Amazon basin, a unique ecosystem, have picked up steam again after many years during the previous Brazilian administration, where all these efforts had been languishing. And let me also mention that before, just a month before the UN General Assembly took place, the 9 countries that form the Amazon Cooperation Treaty organization met in a summit in August, and for the first time, they decided to step up law enforcement actions against criminal activities taking place in the Amazon forest. Now, this is very interesting because this Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization is an old organization. It was established at the end of the 1970s, and it was the first time for the first time this year. It decided to pick up issues of not only generally sustainable development in the Amazon region, but really law enforcement cooperation against crime, and they produced a joint action plan. Okay, let's see what happens. There are many events and many initiatives in this regard, in this direction, that are taking place in various parts of the world. It's probably too early to say whether they will translate into something really concrete this time. But, and here I come, it's not too late. It's not too late to start asking a few critical questions that so far have not been asked regularly. So one question is, how are we going to handle the 2 major battles that we are fighting, or at least that we are supposed to fight nowadays? One, the fight against climate change, and on the other hand, the fight against organized crime. So one question, and I'm going to try to address in this presentation, is should we continue to handle these 2 battles in silos, or shall we try and see whether they can intersect? And whether we want them intersect, how can it be done? Also, is organized crime a net contributor to carbon emissions or not? And if so, to what extent? And finally, that leads me to asking a broader question about whether or not we should repurpose and reshape the criminal justice and criminal policy tools that we use, in order to ensure that these tools not only fight the organized crime for which they were designed, but they do so in a way that contributes to reducing carbon emissions. Okay, so we are basically trying here to handle some interdisciplinary ground and merge climate change and organized crime and the tools used to fight against both, and see whether this sort of strange mix could potentially produce something interesting, basically. Next slide, please. Illegal deforestation, why am I mentioning? Oh, first of all, I also need to say that I mentioned the Amazon forest before because it's clearly an iconic example of a geographical area that has a huge role to play in the world in terms of absorbing carbon emissions. So it's an iconic example. It's paradigmatic of the efforts or the failure of current efforts to fight illegal deforestation. But I could have referred also to other geographical areas in other continents. It could have been sub-Saharan Africa. It could have been Southeast Asia as well. Okay. And so illegal deforestation is certainly among the most carbon-intensive activities pursued by criminal organizations. Okay. And we at Traceit, Anna mentioned it before, the Transnational Alliance Against Illicit Trade, we estimated that the retail annual value of illegal logging is $150 billion US, which makes it the world's most profitable natural resource crime. And at the same time, 1/3 of the carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere is absorbed by forests. So illegal deforestation is a natural candidate for our close attention here. Illegal deforestation takes place for a number of reasons, okay? And I want to be succinct here. I don't want to go into details, but obviously the most intuitive reasons why forests are destroyed is in order to produce timber, okay, that is legally or illegally exported to other countries. And here we're of course focusing on the illegal side of the problem. So smuggling of timber to produce furniture for other countries, notably. I wanted to share something interesting also. An interesting data I found is that there's a report done by UNEP and Interpol that estimated that between 60 and 80% of illegal wood products entering the European Union from tropical areas is not in the form of round wood, but rather pulp and paper products. And that gives you and that's not by coincidence, because if law enforcement authorities manage to seize paper-based products, it gets extremely difficult to trace back the origin of these products. Okay, and so it becomes even more difficult to identify potentially the criminal syndicates and the groups that are behind this illicit trade. Okay, so here we really have a clear intention by organized criminal groups to smuggle this type of products, but to do it in such a way as to minimize the risk of detection. Okay. So smuggling timber, but also I mentioned in this slide, narco deforestation. I found this particularly interesting. This is a new term that has been coined very recently and really drew my attention a couple of years ago. Narco deforestation, as far as I understand, refers to two phenomena. First phenomenon, forests are destroyed in order to make space for drug cultivation. Okay? In Latin America, in South America in particular, we are seeing large portions of the Amazon basin destroyed in order to grow coca crops. And by the way, once land is cleared for this purpose, and coca leaves are harvested, then the process of turning coca leaves into cocaine begins. And this is also extremely carbon intensive, because I don't know how many of you know that in order to produce 1 kilogram of cocaine, the processed products, 300 liters of gasoline are needed. Okay, so you clearly see the carbon emission impact of this type of activity. What I find even more interesting in terms of narco deforestation is the links that have been identified between illegal logging, drug trafficking, and money laundering. Okay, there has been a study that has been published in 2017, focusing on the experience of 3 Central American countries: Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Honduras. And this study has shown that between 15 and 30% of forest losses in those 3 countries are due to money laundering schemes. So what happens in practice is that increasingly you have drug traffickers that are accumulating massive amounts of cash, of proceeds from drug offenses, and they are laundering this money through the purchase of lands that are cleared and then destined to agricultural purposes, or cattle ranching and other industrial activities. So I found this interesting, and the best example that shows, as I said before, the links between money laundering, illegal logging, and drug trafficking activities. Next slide, please. Thank you. Illegal waste burning. So waste crime is the other big culprit in the production of carbon emissions and the injection of toxic elements into the atmosphere. Okay? And this occurs chiefly through the unlawful and uncontrolled burning of scraps, especially hazardous substances. And I wanted to mention a report by Interpol in 2022. It's a threat assessment that highlighted that the illicit burning of waste is steadily increasing in several EU member states, and it has many severe consequences in terms of air pollution and health hazards. I don't know if you saw, there were some there were very interesting news released a couple of years ago about scrap burning in Romania. Romania and other Eastern European countries are some of the places where waste burning takes place in very big proportions. So what happens? The traditional criminal dynamic here is that you have entrepreneurs in say in Western Europe that want to save money and do not want to comply with expensive regulations that would impose them to dispose of their waste in certain manners, and so they turn to criminal organizations. They entrust their waste to those criminal organizations that act as intermediaries, and through their corrupt networks of complacent and collusive officials, they manage to bring all this stuff, which is often very toxic stuff, to third countries. I mean, this is not the end of the story. The sad part of the story is that in many cases, you also have the involvement of marginalized communities here. And the case of Romania is very instructive because it shows that there were many impoverished communities there, and there are currently, that scrap a living by collecting whatever type of garbage and plastic waste has been thrown out by illegal actors, and burn this. And and burn this in order to find some metal, because what they want to do is find some metal in whatever electronic cable, computer, radio, TV they can find in these huge landfills, illegal landfills, so that it can obtain metal for reselling. So next one, please. Next slide. So I wanted to go back one step here and let you know and tell you that, well, there may be other criminal areas that that we could mention. And also, I thought once again I would limit myself to the examples of illegal deforestation and waste burning, because I thought they were two, again, iconic and very illustrative examples of what I'm trying to say. But the list is certainly not an exhaustive one. So what do we do about this? What do we do about this? And here I mentioned 3 potential areas of intervention that we should probably pay more attention to than we've done so far. Here again, I'm not suggesting that these 3 areas form an exhaustive list of actions that we could take, but the intention really is only to get the ball rolling here and to propose a concept that could hopefully be further expanded. So what to do about this? The most intuitive response to the criminal phenomena that I just mentioned is increase and strengthen law enforcement efforts. Ensure that law enforcement authorities focus on environmental crimes, and potentially on those environmental crimes that are responsible for more directly responsible for climate change. This is pretty obvious. Another very obvious thing that can be done is ensuring that, but I don't want to go into that, but of course, you also need to ensure that once it acts, law enforcement, police cars, etc., can be electric cars, whatever. I don't want to be simplistic, and I will skip this. What I want to focus on is that I think that there are a number of legal tools and mechanisms that we are using nowadays that can be repurposed in such a way as to actively contribute to the goal of having a carbon neutral economy in a few years. And these are the 3 areas, again, I will focus on. So I'll move straight into criminal asset recovery. If you can move to the next slide, please. Can you move to criminal asset recovery, please? Thank you. Criminal asset recovery, there's a great potential here. Follow the money. Here we're talking about actions taken by governments to freeze, seize, and eventually confiscate proceeds of crimes and instrumentalities used to commit those crimes. It's an underutilized tool. And let me just mention one very sad statistics. According to Europol's latest report from 2022, out of all the illicit financial flows that are circulating within the European Union, only 2% get eventually confiscated. In a paper I wrote a couple of years ago, I made some calculations, and I found that if this percentage of confiscated criminal assets could only rise or increase by 1 or 2 points, that would amount to millions of euros that could potentially be utilized for a number of reasons, including, and here I mentioned 3 examples, including sponsoring green startups, developing more subsidies for the energy transition, and also ensuring that confiscated lands, for example, can be used for purposes such as sustainable farming and industrial practices. Okay, so this is one example of something very concrete that we can do. And now the second potential tool we could use. Next slide, please. Disposal of illicit goods. What I want to talk about here is how are we going to dispose of the massive amounts of illicit, and by illicit I mean substandard and counterfeit goods that are circulating worldwide and that customs authorities seize. Okay? The OECD indicates that goods that violate intellectual property rights, mainly counterfeiting and piracy, account for 2.5% of global trade. Yeah? And and based on the latest report by the World Customs Organization, there was a total of 192 tons only of illicit medicines that have been seized in 2022 alone by its member states. Okay? Not to speak of all other sorts of goods that are counterfeited and regularly seized by customs authorities. Footwear, bags, luxury goods, pesticides, tobacco products, alcohol, electrical plugs, even diapers. All of these products are very often seized. And so the question is, how are we going to dispose of these products? Now, the problem is that in many cases, in many countries, specifically developing countries, but not exclusively, these counterfeit goods are disposed of in open burning events, which are a good way, on the one hand, for law enforcement authorities to show their achievements. Okay? Look at how much we have been able to seize in terms of counterfeit goods. Show their success, and also impress the public, because these are very often public burnings, impress the public about the magnitude of the phenomenon. And so, but the problem is this way of disposing of these goods is extremely bad for, as you can imagine, for the environment and in terms of carbon emissions. Okay, so what do we do? Do we continue to burn, or do we try to envisage other methodology for disposing of these goods? Are we potentially going to think about recycling these goods? Are we maybe considering humanitarian donations to avoid, this destiny for these goods? I'm not inventing anything new. These are all ideas that have been circulating in various international fora, including the WTO, WIPO, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization. And I think we need to jumpstart existing international initiatives and ensure that they get new life and be disseminated. Okay. And the third area, next slide, please. The third area I thought it was interesting to mention is rethinking prison ecosystems. Now, I need to be very humble and honest with you. I'm not at all an expert in prison policy measures. So here I'm going out of my comfort zone, let's say. But I thought still was something interesting, and I wanted to share it with you just to plant the seed in someone's ears and potentially to see some development. What I'm suggesting here is that prisons ecosystems offer the potential for an impactful contribution to global decarbonization efforts. I came across recently about a number of initiatives, especially taking place especially in U.S. penitentiary systems, where inmates engage in various types of training and vocational programs during their incarceration, learning the skills that could subsequently be reutilized once they have served their sentences into the eco-friendly economy upon completing their sentences, right? So is there a way to ensure that inmates spend their prison sentences in a way that afterwards that can be reintegrated as workers somehow in the green economy. Okay, another potential another idea here, green social services. There are a number of countries that envisage social and public service for inmates. Can we potentially imagine people convicted of environmental crimes providing social service towards the community, perhaps involving the performance of civic work that is instrumental in combating climate change and protecting the environment? Where countries already provide for the possibility of performing public service works for convicted persons, the existing legal frameworks could perhaps be further refined in these directions. Okay. Next slide, please. And last one. I think my intention here is to send a message of optimism, to basically say, yes, the battle against organized crime and climate change can converge. We can repurpose our tools, our criminal tools, in terms of upholding and energizing and contributing to climate change objectives. But I also don't want to pass off as a naive person, and I don't want to hide the difficulties and the challenges that are out there. I don't want to hide the challenges that stand in the way of effective criminal asset recovery, which is complicated, is time consuming, is resource consuming. I don't want to hide the fact that many countries are still not familiar with this tool. Most countries in the world still only freeze and confiscate cash, but there are only very few ones, and I'm proud that my country of origin, Italy, is one of those countries. Very few have a real expertise in terms of confiscating companies, for example. Okay, so companies are a difficult assets to manage, and here the challenge is really to take a company that have been associated with mafia groups, for example, take this company out of its illegal context and ensure somehow, without closing it down, that it can work within the parameters of a legal economy. Extremely complicated, but definitely necessary in order to ensure the confiscation of lands and real estates, for example, can be used for sustainable and green-related projects. Disposal of illicit goods. Okay, I mentioned before the possibility that instead of doing open burnings of counterfeit goods, we could use those seized goods for humanitarian donations. Okay, well, this sounds like a great idea, but also one that presents a number of challenges, because it's not just about taking a counterfeit shoe, for example, and removing the counterfeit tag, the counterfeit mark, right? And simply reintroduce this into the into trade channels. There may be safety and health issues here. Who can be sure that a counterfeit T-shirt, for example, has not been colored with dyes that is toxic for the skin of the people who wear it? Okay? So yes, we need to be careful with this. We cannot simply reintroduce those items into the commerce by simply removing the trademarks that have been faked. We have to have overcome a number of objections by the brand owners that are striking a note of caution, that are saying, oh, careful before introducing this stuff into commerce. We may have liability issues. We are not sure. We may have a loss of brand image for ourselves, and so on and so forth. There is the issue also of who is going to pay for the destruction and for the disposal of these illicit goods. Okay? In principle, the brand owners should not be those who pay for the destruction of these goods, but in reality, they end up doing it. Okay? Because the importers of counterfeit goods and the infringers of trademarks very often disappear. Their companies get very easily liquidated, or they reside in non-cooperative jurisdictions. So basically, brand owners very often end up anticipating the fees and the fees for storing and then destroying the seized counterfeit goods and never manage to recover their money. So you have a paradoxical situation where in many cases brand owners would say, okay, it's too costly for us. We don't do anything about this. Let's have these goods move into commerce. And these are counterfeit goods, okay? Prisons, setting the basics straight first. In many countries in the world, prisons are affected by a number of huge problems. One of those problems is overcrowding. Okay, so before implementing probably the measures that I just mentioned here, it's important to set the basics straight to ensure that penitentiary systems work at a basic level. At the same time, and here I would conclude my small presentation, I hear the objection of many people who would say, oh, but all the measures that you're recommended are measures that only wealthy countries can implement. Okay, only countries that have the necessary resources, etc., can afford to conceive of confiscation, disposal of counterfeit goods in environmentally friendly manners, etc., etc. This is true probably to some extent, but I'm also convinced that to a good extent, imagine a country that is in a position to carry out systemic reform of its legal system in various areas. Think about, for example, some of the countries that are candidate to join the European Union, and they are being asked to do an in-depth kind of reform of their legal systems to comply with EU legal requirements. Well, in this case, why not adding a strong carbon-related component to their policies, since they have to reform them from scratch, basically. I would stop here, and I think now it's very clear. The message is very clear that the whole purpose for this presentation was really to launch some thoughts to the audience and get your reaction, and maybe ensuring that this conversation can continue later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. This is really great. I can show you our applause, and I'm sure that I'm reflecting the feelings of many of the participants. I think that your presentation works as an eye-opener. You really managed to put together some concepts that are very, very dear to civil society and to our members and to civil society organizations that are working in this area. And some of the issues that you presented, they relate so much to things that we see. Many of you may know I worked for a long time in the firearms area. And the issue of destruction of confiscated firearms is the same that you mentioned. There are these bonfires, now they make a huge fire to destroy the firearms. And you can imagine the amount of lead and toxic fumes that go in the destruction of illegal arms. So thank you, really an eye-opener for many, many points of view. I would like now to give the floor to Michela Polimeni, who has already expressed a wish to ask you a question. So I don't know if Michela is ready. Michela, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you very much. I would like to first of all thank Stefano Betti for the presentation, which gave me a lot of food for thought. And I have one question. I was wondering, what can the United Nations do? What are the steps the United Nations should take in order to better support governments in fighting specific cases of convergence between organized crime and climate change? For example, could the adoption, which has already been proposed, of a fourth protocol to the UNTOC dedicated to illicit trafficking of wildlife crime, which would also criminalize trafficking of timber, would that be an efficient tool for this fight and against the convergence of these two major battles?
Michela, thanks for this question. It's a very critical one. I want to be very blunt and, of course, give my own subjective opinion on what you're saying. The people may disagree. And in a nutshell, I'm not a big fan of creating too many new international conventions in specific sectors. Okay, I know that there's an ongoing debate about creating a new protocol to the UNTOC Convention on wildlife trafficking, potentially other criminal areas. There is potential value to such an approach. One value is that you really you can manage to channel law enforcement and policymakers' attention to a specific type of crime that you are prioritizing in a certain period of time. Okay, this is the first certain value. Second value, you may end up with a new crime-specific protocol. You can end up creating a nice network of focal points in the various states parties, and therefore potentially facilitating information exchange for various purposes around that specific crime. The problem of this approach in general is that we are fragmenting legal tools in a situation where we see increasing convergence between types of crimes committed by the same criminal groups. So we have crimes, we have polycriminality that has to be addressed, okay? And I don't know if the right answer to this increasing polycriminality is creating more sectoral sort of instruments. The other thing, and to answer your question, is I don't think that apart from, I don't know, a network of focal points for a specific crime, a new convention in specific sectors would add anything more qualitatively different from what already the UNTOC convention contains in terms of measures for asset freezing and confiscation, extradition, and mutual legal assistance. A new protocol would probably more or less repeat those provisions. So why not simply using those that we already have under the UNTOC convention? And by the way, our convergence between environmental and organized crime is also handled, is also dealt with in other convention that we have around. And we should not forget, we have the CITES convention that also addresses part of the problem whenever we have illicit trading in endangered species. We have the Basel Convention on transboundary movement of illegal waste, etc., etc. So rather than creating a new instrument, why not try to make sense of all we have scattered around?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michela, for this very interesting question, and thank you, Stefano, for your response. I see that we have in the chat a lot of praise for Stefano and the question, and there is one raised hand. So I would like to give the floor to Dennis, who has raised his hand, and then there is the question from Jay Albanese in the chat. Maybe Stefano, you can start reading that, and maybe after Dennis' question, you may address both. So Dennis, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I've learned so much today, something new today. I just wonder, and I want clarification, if there's any connection between what you've presented, the connection between what you presented and transportation as it relates to chain in organized crime, especially in illegal deforestation and smuggling of logs. Is there anything, because I didn't see anything connecting the dots, I mean, anything around transportation system? How do we address that? Thank you.
Are you referring to transportation means used
Okay, I don't know if the question was clear enough. I think it was about means of transportation. Yeah.
Okay.
But
yes, I was sorry. For some reason, I got muted. So now I hope I'm unmuted.
yes.
Okay. Intermediaries in the physical world, so those who ship items, certainly have a huge role, is a big role to play also. When we are talking about, for example, the transport of illegal goods, whether they are counterfeit or smuggled items, etc., there is a lot of activity that is going on and try and see what can be the role and the responsibility of transporters, including shipping companies, freight forwarders, for example. Are they supposed to, and there are difficult legal questions here to handle. So thanks for the question, because the transportation angle is a big hotspot here. What is the responsibility? Should they be liable for what they transport? Are they supposed to carry out due diligence in terms of who the shipper is? What if a private company has flagged a certain shipper as an infringer, as a criminal? Okay. Is the shipping company supposed to do something about it, to stop doing business with that person, know your customer obligations, and so on and so forth? So certainly, this is a critical area. Of course, I didn't mention it here because I couldn't see the direct link with, with carbon emissions, and with the specific objective of this presentation, but certainly it's part of the equation.
Apologies. Stefano, did you manage to read the question from Jay Albanese, or would you like Jay to repeat it? Maybe, Jay, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, I only have a question
Sure.
for Cassian, not from Jay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Jay, it's Jay first. I gave the floor to Jay Albanese first. I know that there is another hand raised later. First, Jay Albanese first, please.
Yes, Stefano, I appreciate your presentation. As I indicated in the chat, as you know, many of these crimes are committed not only by OC groups, but by corporations and states themselves. So my question is there a need for alternative approaches to the major political obstacles to, investigating, prosecuting, and penalties, which are quite different in the cases of businesses and states, as you know? Thank you.
Jay, this is a very sensitive and critical question, and thanks for asking me. Of course, I don't have the answer to this, but it allows me to mention a work stream that they're pursuing that I'm pursuing in the context, by the way, of the global initiative against transnational organized crime. I think we'll increasingly discuss about the use of sanctions, state sanctions against organized crime and other state actors involved in organized crime, because of the collusion, of the entanglement that we increasingly see between organized criminal groups and state actors, basically. So, I mean, I have the impression that we will soon see a lot of limits in the ability of our traditional classical criminal justice international conventions to really make a difference, to really have a critical role in fighting organized crime. And we'll increasingly see a growing role for sanctions regimes in this area, in the form of asset freezing for certain individuals, maybe part of the political establishment of states, and travel bans and these sorts of measures, basically. This is really in a nutshell the way I see it. But I also see as a potential consequence of this the politicization, increasing politicization of the fight against organized crime, because these sanctions are clearly issued by the governments, by the political authorities of certain governments against individuals from other governments. So there will be a much bigger, stronger political component here than what we have in the traditional forms of international cooperation based on judicial orders, for example, or like mutual legal assistance across states.
Great, thank you very much. We have, so I'm afraid that you couldn't see the praise from Linda Whittung. So maybe, Linda, would you like to repeat your comments to Stefano? Linda Whittung.
Thank you, Anna. I actually posted it for everyone to see. My background is 32 years as a prosecutor, and I'm now working as a research analyst in climate, among other issues. And your presentation is, without exception, one of the most riveting I've heard in a long while. And the information that you were managing to put in your presentation is just shocking. And so my question of you is, I've already got your bibliography now. So I'm hoping that that covers the areas that you've talked about. But my other question of you is, if you can keep somebody from California awake at 6 in the morning, not even drinking her coffee. I don't need coffee when I'm listening to you. Is it possible, do you do virtual presentations for either law enforcement or some interested environmentalists here in California? And the alternative is, I am part of a women's group of 60,000 members around the world, and they need to hear what you have to say. If I could talk to my powers that be about you doing a presentation for them, for an audience, and then let everyone understand and absorb it who couldn't be there, would that be something that you could do? And I don't necessarily need an answer right away, because I suspect you are a very busy and important man. However, whatever space we can get from you, and I think I speak probably for the audience, would be deeply appreciated. And again, I worship at your shrine. I worship at your shrine. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, right? So Linda, thank you very much.
Yes,
this is the best sort of reaction that one could have to a presentation. Yes, I'm very busy. I'm not very important at all. And the answer is yes. I would love to be in contact with you and see what we could do together. So either in my capacity as a consultant, or as part of the Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade, or in any other.
We'll take anything that you can offer, and what I'll do is I'll work through Anna to set up an introduction and a Zoom thing, and then I was doing my happy dance in case you couldn't see it, and then I will start contacting my people and getting them all to do a happy dance. So as we say in Hollywood and California, our people will contact your people.
Always happy to be invited to dancing.
Okay, so lots of dancing in front of us. Thank you, Linda. It's very important as you heard, the leader and also board member of the Alliance. So we will follow up with pleasure. So what happened with Cassian? Cassian, you had your hand raised and then you disappeared. Would you like to speak, Cassian Bitanga?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question was posed in the chat. I was just addressing my question to Stefan. What happened if human life violates human life in the context of organizing crime? Do you think UNDC will get involved to access the victims to the justice? If yes, what is the role of UNDC when we talk about criminal justice? Thank you.
I'm not sure I fully understand your question. Now you're asking about the role of victims against organized crime.
So the question is this: what happened if human life violates human life in the context of organizing crime? Can UNDC get involved to access the victims to the justice? If yes, what is criminal justice to you? Thank you.
Maybe
Yeah,
Stefan,
for the
if I
UNDC
may,
part, I'm not competent.
maybe I think that that Cassian's question is relates to the need to align organized crimes to human rights issues and what is being done. It happens that today we were discussing exactly these issues in the meeting that we were attending with some colleagues. So there will be, Cassian, there will be literature to consult, there will be results of this meeting, so you may have some material to reflect on soon. We will share it through the Alliance in the coming days. So thank you very much for your question. It's a very important one, of course. We have another person with a raised hand, that is Femi Oyebode.
Thank you so much, Anna, for this beautiful initiative, as well as the resource person in the presentation. My own comment or observation has to do with the one that really affects the African community, and it has to do with the issue of illegal deforestation and illegal logging, where the speaker mentioned the issue of narco deforestation. I came from an area that is being affected by such, and that I pick that as an area of interest. Why am I saying that? In Nigeria, for instance, the most commonly abused drug is cannabis sativa. We come from area that has the most fertile land for the cultivation of marijuana. For instance, in Nigeria, law prohibits the cultivation, the consumption, and trafficking of cannabis. But when you now look at it, we are talking about the issue of transnational organized crime. The challenge, therefore, is that in this area, while some other countries frown at it, especially Nigeria, other countries also legalize it. So what is the way forward now? When Nigeria, for instance, consider the cultivation and the effect of it, they consider it as unlawful. The cultivation of cannabis as unlawful is affecting our environment. The deforestation, because before these people had to cultivate, they had to make a lot of deforestation in the bush, clear a lot of hectares of land that are supposed to be used for the cultivation of healthy crops. But this time around, they use it for unhealthy something. And as we are saying it, other countries also legalize it. So at what point now do we now classify that as a transnational organized crime in view of the fact that we have a different legislation for these particular crops.
Stefano.
Well, I don't want to enter the debate about the legalization or not of certain drugs. This is really not the purpose of my presence here. So what I can say is that the research that has been carried out about narco deforestation in Central America, which I just illustrated, it is interesting to know from you that similar dynamics are also taking place in some parts of the African continent. So I very much encourage you and other people to deepen this type of research and see what comes out of it, and potentially bring the outcome of this new research to before international institutions to further discuss and what to do in terms of legalizing or not, which again I'm not going to enter into.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Femi. And I have in the chat there are comments from John Scanlon, and maybe John, if you make your comments loud, they are going to be also recorded, because as you know, this meeting is being recorded and it's going to be an important resource for those who will listen to it later. So John, would you like please to repeat your comments? Thank you. John, you left? I'm afraid John left, so we will keep your comments. Maybe someone can read the comments, maybe Camilla?
So John's comment is, thanks for the presentation. Many states have supported an additional protocol to prevent and combat wildlife trafficking, and he attached the link. A new instrument would be not to duplicate UNTOC, just as the other protocols do not. We will be speaking at several events at COP28 on this topic. And here's another link. Thank you, John Scanlon, Chair, Global Initiative, to end wildlife crime. And he also attached another summary of feedback from member states on an additional protocol.
Thank you. I don't know, Stefano, would you like to comment on this, or we move to the next question?
No, I'm just saying, this is really interesting and certainly to be followed. I'm really looking forward to seeing the way that this crime-specific protocol will contain innovative or unheard of provisions. So I'm stand ready to look at it and to become a supporter of crime-specific conventions. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Marco Magrin. Would you like to ask your question, Marco? Marco, are you online?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that. No, it's just Zoom, No, I was just wondering if you could expand a bit. Obviously there's in relation to the war in Ukraine and how it's affected the illicit lumber market in Europe. Of course, Ukraine has dense forests and forest lands. So I was just wondering how the war impacted that kind of network in a European context. Thanks.
To be very honest with you, I don't know the way that this specific crime area has impacted the European market. There are very interesting contributions that has been particularly published by the Global Initiative that analyze the way that organized crime in Ukraine has influenced and has had an impact on human trafficking, on arms trafficking. But I've seen nothing personally on this topic, so it would be very interesting for me to have more information on that.
Thank you very much. So because I know that there are more questions, so I know that let's see, in the chat there is Alliance, and behind the Alliance I think is Tobias Krackler. So Tobias, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So government subsidies and incentives have proven indispensable for the development and marketability of new technologies in the sector of renewable energies, but they have also been attracting the attention of criminal elements. There have been multiple cases of fraudulent biodiesel being distributed. Solar power plants have been repeatedly targeted by organized crime groups, and cases of fraud and money laundering have plagued the renewable energy sector. How can we ensure that organized crime is not profiting from existing decarbonization efforts? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very broad question, Tobias. So, of course, it requires a lot of time to elaborate, but I agree with you that there are many dimensions in terms of organized crime involvement in carbon heavy, let's say, activities. I very much see an issue with fraud schemes that are inadvertently enabled by tax incentives and governmental subsidies, for example, in the renewable energy sector. All these sort of legal frameworks are exploited for fraud purposes, one. I see a significant risk of, I mean, not personally, but what we see around is a significant risk of infiltration of criminal organizations in the supply chains for components that are used for the manufacturing of, say, solar panels. And here, the risk is really that you end up with the market being flooded with substandard products like solar panels that can be also dangerous for the health. And here, one of the one of the mitigating actions that could be taken is better due diligence throughout the supply chain, and ensuring that every person that is involved in some role within the supply chain for these products know their customers. Okay, and I also see a problem upstream when it comes to renewable energy, and this is the risk of organized criminal group / non-state armed groups controlling the territories and the places where rare minerals and metals like cobalt and nickel are extracted. And I'm referring really to the minerals that are critical for the green transition, the green energy transition. So we need also to look upstream and see what happens there. I can also mention another risk that involves renewable energy sectors, and it's the risk that the risk of attack against critical infrastructure that is involved in either in the production or in the processing or the distribution of renewable energies. And here, I mean, the people that would be responsible for these attacks are not necessarily organized criminal groups, but rather individuals or group of individuals that may have a grievance against the green revolution, because we see many people, including organized people, that think that the energy transition goes to their disadvantage, that it's responsible for job losses, basically. And and they've already organized various acts of sabotage, which may potentially one day degenerate into terrorist acts. We are not there yet, fortunately, but this is another dimension of the problem that it's probably worth considering, going a little bit beyond pure organized crime related actions.
Thank you very much, Stefano. There are more questions. There is one from Camilla. Camilla, can you please read your question, please?
Hello, good evening, Stefano. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, how could civil society help institutions in tackling the obstacles presented by environmental crime, and considering also your reports on the attractiveness of the environmental crime for criminal networks, with factors such as high profits, legal disparities between countries, low risk of detention, and minimal penalties. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, a question that would deserve a long answer, so I will try to be very, very concise. Civil society organizations can contribute in many ways. In the areas that I was just mentioning in my presentation, like disposal of seized counterfeit goods and confiscation issues in general, I think there is an incredible role for civil society organizations to come up with creative and locally meaningful solutions on how, for example, counterfeit goods can be recycled, right? One great example that I have in mind is at some point there were counterfeit sneaker shoes that were counterfeit, that were seized, and there was a decision, anyways, to recycle the rubber soles of these shoes in order to create playgrounds for children. You know? So this is exactly the type of initiative that I feel civil society organizations can come up with, you know, having in mind the needs of local people. And then, of course, you have a role, a major role that civil society can play in terms of exposing cases of alleged misconduct and environmental crimes. Although here, I mean, one cannot hide the huge difficulties and challenges of considering the growing number of countries where freedom of press is curtailed in various ways, including through violence, intimidation, and more subtle forms also of threats that lead civil society and journalists to basically take an attitude of self-censorship, basically. But this remains a critical role for civil society organizations in the areas also that we are discussing.
Thank you, Stefano. I see that in the audience we have Mirella Dumar, who is the chief of the civil society unit of UNODC. So I don't know, Mirella, on this point, do you have anything to say? Mirella, you there? Maybe she cannot connect now. Okay, maybe we can give the floor to Eduardo Vetere, who has raised his hand in the meantime. Eduardo.
Thank you, Anna. I wanted to express all my gratitude to you, first of all, for having organized this meeting, first, and secondly, for having invited Stefano. Stefano, congratulations. You have really not only raised very, very important issues in relation to these two major issues of organized crime on one side and protection of the ecosystem on the others. Not only this, you have raised these important issues and connections, but also provided some very, very important research results in order to see how to combine efforts. I think that if we think that the major conference is taking place in Dubai next week, and another one on organized crime is taking in Atlanta at the beginning of December. Probably it would be good if there would be some combined efforts on the part of these two conferences to better consider some of the issues that you have exposed. Congratulations again, and thank you again for having made us aware of these important issues. Thank you.
Just allows me to thank Eduardo for his nice words. They are particularly important to me. Eduardo was one of the, he was my boss back at the UNODC when I joined the terrorism prevention branch, and he's really the one with, together with Jean-Paul Laborde, allow me to, you know, to get really involved into all of this. So thanks to you, and I'm so grateful and honored that you're part of this audience, Eduardo.
If I can add, I was very pleased and honored, in a sense, to have recruited you and to have been working with you, not only with you, but also with your wife. Best regards also to her.
Okay, so we have the entire history here. Mirella apologized that she had to leave the meeting, but anyway, she sends the best wishes for the follow-up to this. I have also a part of a question that could be a follow-up to what Stefano was mentioning about some good practices. So, Stefano, do you have any good news for us? So anything that you could say, this could be a promising practice, this could be something good to follow, to increase?
In terms of measure, you mean taken by civil society or governments? Are you referring to anything like this?
You mentioned the rubber soles, things like that. You said this is a good example. So I think at least there is some good news. So what else? What else?
Yes, there is another very practical example that comes to my mind right now. The type of measure, again, a civil society could think of in this landscape, and it's in South Africa. In South Africa, at some point, there was a huge seizure of counterfeit tobacco products, and the tobacco within the cigarettes was recycled, but in not to produce any playground for kids, but as fertilizer for fields and for land, for agricultural purposes, and that was really successful. And I think these little creative and initiatives, you know, that some countries take should be somehow compiled and disseminated, because they provide great practical ideas on what to do, especially on counterfeit items, to avoid, you know, to avoid making open burnings and throw in all these carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and actually serving the local community instead of disposing of them in this unconscious manner.
Thank you. These are very concrete examples, very useful for civil society. I see that we have some other participants. Actually, there is Patrick Hauser, who has put some very nice words in the chat. Patrick, are you able to repeat your comments?
Yes, of course. I'm able to repeat my comments. I have to say I don't have a particular professional. I'm not very close to the topic. I have to say I'm just I would like to say a personal friend of Stefano, and I have received the invitation for this presentation, and I was very curious, and that's why I joined today. And like I said, it's been very entertaining, very interesting on top of that, and my congratulations to my old friend.
Patrick, I'm so great you joined this meeting, and for the benefit of everybody, Patrick is one of the best Austrian lawyers.
That's
Thank
very
you.
good.
Working
Yeah.
in a different field than Stefano and probably many of you, but very interested in this topic, and yeah, it's been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Stefan, for involving important stakeholders in all this. There is another person I would like to invite to make some comments, and that is Tariq Koza. Are you still there, Tariq? No, he may have left. No, yes, Tariq.
Yeah, I must compliment Stefano for an excellent presentation made specifically in the context of climate change and organized crime. And the aspect of illegal deforestation, $150 billion illegal logging. So the magnitude of the challenge, you have in your presentation, Stefano, mentioned about Europol's 2022 threat assessment on environmental crime. So could you please tell us what are the key takeaways from this threat assessment? And what are the key challenges, the main ones, of course, in addition to what you have talked about in your presentation? What is Europol's threat assessment in brief? Thank you, Stefano.
Thank you, Tariq. It's a bit difficult for me now to give and it would take too long to give a summary of Europol's threat assessment report, which I think is a 70-page document that addresses many environmental crimes. Let me just say to you that usually Europol threat assessments are very precise, very useful and accurate, because they really take information that are sent over to the organization by its 26 or 27 member states from police databases, and all this information is combined, is processed, is cross-analyzed. So it's really useful. It's a primary source of information for many people in the field. So apologies if I don't give you a summary, but I think you have it in the bibliography that we provided to the organizers. And so happy to continue the chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tariq, and thank you, Stefano. Indeed, we have prepared the bibliography, and I don't know exactly how this is going to be distributed. Maybe Tobias can tell me.
Yes, we will publish the recording on our website in the working group page, and below the recording there will be the bibliography, but I will now also share it in the chat if anyone wants to save it now, but it will be published alongside the recording.
Thank you very much. This is very helpful, and we also received a message from Mirella with congratulations to Stefano for his excellent presentation. A lot of ideas we would need to follow up with the Alliance in the future, and I fully agree on this. And she apologized for not being always on the call. There are also greetings from Edda Giuberti. I don't know if Edda, would you like to say something?
Hello, everyone. I'm Edda Giuberti, President Triple Difesa Onlus, 2011 year, Italy country. I don't speak English very well. And thank you this opportunity. I'm not in the office, but in Milan station.
Trying to take public transportation in Italy, so we sympathize. Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
So thank you.
This
Thank you,
interessante conference.
Indeed. So thank you very much. I think that we have now finished the time that we have at our disposal. I don't know if we have any other question, anyone else who wants to add something, to say something. I don't know if Michaela is satisfied. Michaela, what do you think?
Hi. Hi again. Yes, I'm extremely satisfied, and I would like to repeat, like everybody else, that we need to do some follow-up on topics that have been touched. They're very interesting, and I hope that the working group of the Alliance can follow up on these. Thank you again, Stefano.
Thanks for making this possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really I don't think that that I am able to summarize anything, but I would like to repeat the key takeaway message that you gave us, and it is the need to dismantle some of the issues that we are dealing with every day, that separate issues on organized crime and on environmental protection, and to try to look at their impacts on everyday life, and to be aware of some unthinkable for the day-by-day work, unthinkable consequences of some organized crimes that may end up really affecting everybody's life. So thank you very much for this. I think that you will have a lot of requests for speaking engagements and various things. And so we will be in touch. Thank you again. And floor is yours for last words. Stefano?
Just to say that that would be a great pleasure to keep interacting with you, Anna, personally, with the Alliance, and with whatever participants that thought that the thing that may be useful in the future. So I'm really open to keep this discussion, and so please, Anna, feel free also to give my contact details to anyone who participated here.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Thank you really for accepting our invitation. A big round of applause for you, and hope to see you in person next time. So we'll find a way. Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. As Tobias said, that this meeting is being recorded. It will be posted on the Alliance webpage, and it will be accessible. The chat will be saved. So we will have the possibility also to convey the questions in writing to Stefano, so that he can keep a memory of what he had been asked. Many thanks again, and have a good afternoon, evening, or rest of the day. Bye-bye.